recording now. So I wanted to ask you about a conversation I had with Ian Waddell, which I mentioned in my email to you.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to early 1981, so before your comments in Guelph and the Globe and Mail, which seemed to be so pivotal in reviving Section 35, but going back to when there actually was no section or mention of Aboriginal rights in Trudeau's patriation package, there was this fateful meeting in Ed Broadbent's office where Ian Waddell, Jack Woodward, and Don Rosenblum were writing out a clause, the first draft, really, of what would later become Section 35.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been told that Don Rosenblum went out into Ed's administrative assistant's office and got on the phone and called you in Vancouver to get your advice on what they were writing. Particularly, they were worried what they had written was too broad. But your advice, according to Ian Waddell, was to keep it broad so that the courts could define it over time. So I'm just wondering if you remember that phone call at all.
I don't, but look, that's 30 years ago, I think.
Yes, I realize I'm asking you to recall a phone call that took place.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not.
Okay.
If Don says it occurred that way, I'm sure it did, but I just can't remember it. There were a lot of things happening at the time, and
Right.
I didn't keep a diary, so I honestly can't remember.
No worries.
I'm not much help to you, but there you are.
No problem. I thought I would just ask because it's kind of an amazing story, and Ian still has scribbled in pen and framed on his wall that first draft of what would become Section 35. Okay, well, if you don't mind, I'll just ask a couple more questions about...
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, I do feel like I have a good grasp, as I said, on the events that transpired in 1981, after the clause was removed, and then leading to your resignation from the bench. But I'm curious to know more about what compelled you. Like, for you, what was at stake? From a legal perspective, as someone so pivotal in introducing and shaping Aboriginal rights to the common law.
Well, I had, because, I thought that you will recall that the original draft included Section 35. The original draft of these proposed amendments to the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd given a speech at the Canadian Bar meeting in Vancouver saying how appropriate this was, that the Constitution should, in bringing it up to date, we should acknowledge and protect the rights of Aboriginal peoples. And then when the final negotiations between the Prime Minister and the Premiers, they dropped it, I felt obliged to speak out on the subject. First of all, I felt very strongly about it as a matter of personal belief, but I wouldn't have spoken out if I didn't think that my voice would have some influence. If I had thought that my speaking out would be simply would make no difference, I wouldn't have done it because I knew that what I was about to do was something that for which I would be criticized in many quarters, as indeed I was. But I think I can say it was my personal belief. I believe very strongly that it had been wrong to drop Section 35 at the last minute. I thought it should be reinstated, and I spoke out because I thought my voice might carry some weight. In any event, it was restored, and that was what I had hoped would be the outcome. I mean, many people spoke out, and the voices of Aboriginal leaders were, of course, critical. But I was glad that there was to see it restored. Hope that's of some use.
It is. On what you just mentioned about the voices of Aboriginal leaders, as I mentioned, my dissertation is really focused on specifically the Constitution Express, and I've worked with the family, the descendants of George Manuel, for quite a few years to try to document this movement. So, were you aware of those kinds of efforts of Indigenous advocates, the work they were doing in Ottawa, New York, and London? Including movements like the Constitution Express, and did those movements have an influence on your taking the stand that you did, or what was your impression of them?
Well, look, I am sure I was aware of all of these things occurring, but I confess that I was rather. It was it was a consideration of my own position, what I considered a moral duty to speak out. That really took up that I remember vividly today. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
And I know that a great many folks were engaged in the same struggle, and I was aware of all of these things, but I don't pretend that I can remember any of the details.
Yep.
I think they were concentrating on as I recall, on going to London, and I thought the main arena was Ottawa. So it wasn't. So I wasn't involved in any way in that, and so I'm sure it all helped.
Yes. Yeah. I think some of the Dene people, folks who were involved with you in the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline Inquiry, were also involved in those movements, and I've been having some really fabulous, exciting conversations with them about their role in this.
Oh, Michael Jackson.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to Michael Jackson yet, but I should. But I was in Yellowknife recently and spoke with Stephen Kakfwi. And he drew a really nice connection between the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline Inquiry and the language of Indigenous nationhood, land rights, and self-determination that came out so strongly in that inquiry, and then were taken up again so strongly in the constitutional fight. So I'm seeing a real continuity between those two events.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, I turn up often I suppose in the story of the development of Aboriginal rights. No doubt I turn up too often, but my concern always was the establishment of the recognition and the establishment and recognition of the rights of Indigenous people, where I was, able to play a role. And but Indigenous leaders such as Steve Kakfwi were, of course, he's a good example. They spoke for I spoke as a Canadian seeking to uphold their rights as part of the Canadian of Canada's commitment to Indigenous peoples.
Fantastic. I had a question about one detail in your chapter. You mention that Lord Denning came to comment on the judicial investigation regarding your comments. Do you happen to have any idea how it was that Lord Denning came to comment on this? I haven't.
No, I can't remember. What did the chapter say about that?
Let me just pull up the right section. I'm interested because I'm working with some of the folks from the Indian Association of Alberta who brought a case in the British courts, and Lord Denning made some critical comments there. But specifically in regards to your judicial investigation, he was asked about your intervention in the constitutional debate, and in your chapter he said, "At all events, there are times, I think, when the judges have a responsibility to express their views on matters of great moment, even though it is not in the law courts."
You're right. Well, I wrote that book about 10 or 15 years ago, and you're going to think I'm losing my marbles that I...
No, not at all. No, I'm actually amazed.
Well, if he said it, then that certainly is. Then what I did had the backing of a legendary figure in English speaking in the English speaking world of law. So. I think I'll do a little more digging to see if I can find his full statement and figure out exactly how he came to say that. But it's pretty amazing. And no, thank you for humoring me with these questions that demand going back in time more than 35 years at this stage. It's my pleasure, but good luck to you, and you will be a doctor soon then.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay.
Well, it's a real honor to speak with you, so thank you so much for answering my questions.
Okay, my pleasure.
So just to confirm, it's okay if I quote you in my dissertation based on this conversation?
Yep, perfectly okay.
Fantastic. Thanks.
You've got it taped, so that's fine with me. If I said it, I said it, and it's on tape. That's good.
Great. Well, I'll send you the transcript just so you can have it on.
Sure.
File. Okay. Fantastic.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
again.